He spent his final dollar on an Apache girl. What she gave in return shocked him. But one by one, life's challenges had stripped him of everything. A failed business, a series of bad decisions, and the unkind hand of fate had left him wandering through the Arizona desert with only a single dollar in his pocket. Each step he took on the rough, dusty ground felt heavier than the last, as though the desert itself was trying to hold him down. The sun beat down mercilessly on his worn-out jacket and threadbare hat. Sweat ran down his face, stinging his eyes, but John didn't stop. He had to keep moving. Every town he passed seemed the same. Small clusters of wooden buildings, dusty streets, and people who barely noticed him. Sometimes a shopkeeper would glance at him with a mixture of suspicion and pity, quickly turning away when they realized he had nothing to spend. It was a lonely existence. Nights were even harder. He slept under the open sky, huddled against rocks or the occasional tree, listening to the wind whistle through the canyons and the distant howl of coyotes. Hunger gnawed at his stomach constantly, and his back ached from the weight of carrying the little he owned. But worse than hunger or fatigue was the feeling of invisibility. It seemed as if the world had forgotten him. Yet, despite the weight of his troubles, John carried a flicker of hope inside him. It was faint, sometimes nearly extinguished, but it never fully died. He remembered his mother telling him as a boy that hope was like a tiny flame. You had to protect it, no matter the storm. And so, even when his feet ached and his pockets were empty, he kept moving. He wandered through canyons, crossed dry riverbeds, and trudged along the dusty paths that connected small towns. Every step was a reminder that he had survived another day, and that somehow things could change. One afternoon, as he walked along a narrow dirt road, he spotted a small town in the distance. The buildings were scattered, and a few horse-drawn wagons were tied up along the main street. For a moment, he imagined what it would be like to be welcomed into a home again, to sit at a table with warm food. He shook his head, pushing the thought aside. He had no right to imagine such things. He had no money, no friends, and no place to go. The town looked quiet, almost too quiet, and a feeling of unease settled in his chest. But still, he walked toward it, driven by the simple hope that there might be some small kindness waiting for him there. As he entered the town, he noticed the people staring at him briefly, then quickly looking away. Children played near the edge of the road, their laughter faint but comforting. A horse whinnied somewhere in the distance. John's stomach growled, reminding him of how long it had been since he last ate. He reached into his pocket and felt the crumpled dollar bill, the last remnant of his past life. It was a fragile, insignificant piece of paper, but it carried more weight than anything else he owned. For a moment, he considered spending it on bread or water, but even that small purchase seemed impossible. The town's small general store had prices that were beyond his reach, and the nearest cafe looked like it was meant for people with more than just hope to spend. As he walked further down the street, John noticed a small group of buildings that seemed different from the rest. One was a tiny trading post, another a blacksmith shop, and near the center, a small stand with colorful trinkets and jewelry. A young girl was tending the table, arranging necklaces and beads with careful hands. She had a calm, serene look on her face, and something about her presence made John stop in his tracks. For the first time that day, he felt a spark of curiosity. He didn't know her name, but there was something inviting about the way she smiled at the sun, unaware of the world's hardships, yet strong and proud in her own way. John hesitated, unsure if he should approach. His clothes were tattered, his hair unkempt, and his shoes barely holding together. He felt embarrassed, as though the girl might see him as nothing more than a beggar. But there was a strange pull he could not resist. He walked toward the stand slowly, keeping his eyes on the necklace that sparkled in the sunlight. It was simple, not expensive looking, but beautiful in a way that made him stop and take a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of wonder, something that had been missing from his life. He lingered, pretending to examine the necklaces, even though he knew he could not afford them. He watched the girl carefully, noticing the gentle way she handled each piece, the kindness in her eyes toward every passerby. Something about her seemed different from everyone else in the town. While others ignored him or looked down, she seemed to care about the beauty of her work, about sharing something meaningful with anyone who would stop. John felt a mix of admiration and shame. He had spent so long surviving, barely noticing the world around him, that he had forgotten such simple joys existed. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting the town in shades of gold and orange, John made a decision. He reached into his pocket and held the crumpled dollar tightly. It was all he had left, the last piece of security in a world that had given him little. But something told him that maybe, just maybe, it could be spent on something more than food or drink. Something that could remind him that life still had beauty to offer, even in the smallest forms. With a deep breath, he stepped closer to the table, unsure what would happen next, but ready to take the risk. For the first time in days, John felt a sense of purpose. He did not know if the girl would accept his dollar or if she would even notice him at all. But he could no longer stand still, letting life pass him by. This small act, this tiny gesture of spending his final dollar, felt like a chance for connection, a chance for hope, a chance for something meaningful in a life that had been filled with struggle. As he reached the girl, he noticed how her eyes brightened slightly when she looked at him. There was no judgment, no pity, only quiet acknowledgement. John handed her the dollar, feeling a strange mix of fear and anticipation. He did not know what would happen next. He only knew that, in that moment, he had made a choice to believe that life could offer more than hardship. And as he waited for her reaction, he felt the tiniest spark of hope ignite inside him, a flame he had long thought extinguished. John Miller stood before the small wooden table, his hand still holding the crumpled dollar. He had never felt so nervous and hopeful at the same time. The girl behind the table noticed him, her dark eyes calm and kind. Her hair was long and black, tied neatly so it wouldn't fall into her face while she worked. She moved with a quiet grace, carefully arranging the bead necklaces she had made, each one shining in the afternoon sun. For a moment, John felt like he had stepped into another world, a world where people could be kind and beautiful things could exist even in small towns and deserts. The girl smiled softly, a simple gesture, but it carried warmth and patience. "Hello," she said in a voice that was gentle, like a soft breeze through the desert. "Would you like to look at my necklaces?" John nodded, swallowing hard. His throat felt dry and his stomach twisted with nervousness. I have just $1, he admitted quietly, almost embarrassed. "It's all I have. I was wondering if maybe I could buy something small," she nodded, tilting her head slightly as if understanding more than words could explain. "That's fine," she said. "A small dollar can go a long way." She reached for a simple necklace with blue and white beads and handed it to him. The beads sparkled in the sunlight, and John realized he had never seen anything so delicate and beautiful in his life. For a moment he forgot the hardships, the hunger, the long days of wandering. All he saw was this small, handcrafted piece, and the girl's calm presence made him feel safe, even if only for a few seconds. John handed her the dollar, careful not to crumple it any more than it already was. As he did, the girl's fingers brushed his briefly, and there was a quiet, unspoken understanding between them. It wasn't just about money. It was about human connection. She smiled again, this time a little wider, and handed him the necklace. "Thank you," she said softly, but then she paused and reached for something else, something small hidden behind the table. John watched curiously as she pulled out a small leather pouch. The pouch was simple, rough-hewn, but it had a certain charm. "This is for you," she said. "It is a gift." He blinked in surprise. "A gift?" he asked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. It is from my family. It holds protection, strength, and hope for those who are traveling. Keep it with you. It will help you find your way." John's heart skipped a beat. He had expected nothing more than a simple necklace. He had not expected a gift, especially one that carried meaning. The leather pouch felt heavier than it looked, and he held it gently, as if it were made of glass. He looked at the girl, wanting to ask why she was giving him something so personal, but no words came. Her eyes met his, calm and knowing, and he felt something he hadn't felt in months, an unexpected warmth in his chest, like the first rays of the sun after a long, cold night. I don't know what to say," he murmured, unsure of how to respond. Words felt small and meaningless compared to the gesture she had made. "You don't have to say anything," she said kindly. "Just remember that kindness exists, even when it feels like the world has forgotten you." John nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the simple yet profound act. He turned the necklace over in his hands, admiring the craftsmanship and the care it represented. The blue and white beads seemed to shimmer more brightly now, reflecting not only the sunlight but the hope he felt growing quietly inside him. The leather pouch rested in his other hand, and he could almost feel the gentle weight of protection it promised. For a few moments, they stood in silence. The town moved around them, people walking past without noticing, horses tied near the buildings, children laughing at the edge of the street. But for John, time seemed to slow. In that small corner of the world, he felt seen, acknowledged, and most importantly, reminded that not all gestures required wealth or power. A simple act of kindness had changed something inside him, making him feel alive in a way he hadn't in months. Curiosity began to take over his nervousness. How did you come by these gifts?" he asked finally. He didn't want to seem rude, but he had to know more. The girl's smile softened. "My family has passed down these things for generations," she said. "We give them to travelers or anyone in need, to remind them that life can still be good, even when it seems hard. The world is full of struggles, yes, but also full of people who care. These are small reminders." John listened carefully, taking in every word. He had never thought about life this way. Most people he met only cared about themselves or avoided strangers like him. Yet here was someone, a young girl he barely knew, offering more than just a trinket. She was offering guidance, hope, and the simple assurance that he was not invisible. As they spoke, a small breeze blew through the street, lifting strands of the girl's hair and carrying the faint scent of desert sage. John inhaled deeply, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in months. He realized that while the necklace and the pouch were tangible items, the real gift was the human connection, the feeling that someone cared enough to notice him, even in a town where no one else had. The girl watched him carefully, sensing his hesitation. "You can keep both," she said softly, "but remember their power is not in the beads or the leather. It is in what they remind you of: courage, hope, and kindness. Keep them close and they will help you through difficult times." John felt a lump in his throat. He had spent his final dollar on a simple necklace, thinking it was the end of what he could afford. Yet here he was, holding not only the necklace but a meaningful gift that seemed to carry the weight of generations. He realized that life had a strange way of surprising people, giving them more than they had ever expected when they least anticipated it. For the first time, he truly understood that wealth was not only measured in money. It was measured in the moments of connection, in the small acts of generosity, and in the courage to reach out when the world felt dark. He looked at the girl again, wanting to thank her properly, but words failed him. He nodded instead, a gesture of deep gratitude that needed no explanation. The girl smiled, sensing that her message had been received. She returned to arranging her necklaces, leaving John to hold the necklace and leather pouch with care. He could feel something shifting inside him, a quiet, steady hope that he had almost forgotten. Perhaps life still had possibilities. Perhaps he could still find kindness, purpose, and meaning, even after months of wandering and despair. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the town in golden hues, John took a deep breath and felt the first real sense of optimism he had in a long time. He had come to the town weary, hungry, and almost broken by life's hardships. And yet, a simple encounter with a kind-hearted girl had reminded him that the world could still hold surprises, that even in the smallest gestures, there was power, beauty, and hope. With a renewed sense of purpose, John thanked her silently in his heart and turned to continue his journey. He did not know what the future would hold, but for the first time in weeks, he felt ready to face it. The necklace hung around his neck, and the leather pouch rested safely in his pocket. They were more than gifts. They were reminders that even in the darkest moments, life could offer light, kindness, and the chance to start anew. John walked away from the stand slowly, savoring the warmth that lingered from the encounter. The town seemed brighter, the air fresher, and the path ahead less daunting. He had no money, no home, and no certainty, yet he felt richer than he had in a long time. It was not the dollar that mattered, it was the connection, the understanding, and the simple, profound gift of human kindness that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. John Miller walked slowly away from the small wooden table where the Apache girl had been selling. Her necklaces. The necklace hung lightly around his neck, and the small leather pouch rested in his pocket. Yet, it wasn't the objects themselves that weighed on his mind. It was the meaning behind them, the care and kindness that had been offered to him when he had nothing left to give. For the first time in weeks, he felt something stirring inside him, a warmth he hadn't known he could feel, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the world still had room for small miracles. He found a quiet spot on the edge of town, near the bank of a dry riverbed, and sat down. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the dusty landscape. John opened the leather pouch carefully, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface. Inside, he found a mixture of dried herbs and tiny seeds, each one carefully packed in small bundles. The scent of the herbs was faint but soothing, earthy and familiar in a way he could not explain. He could feel the significance of the gift, even if he did not fully understand it yet. John's thoughts raced as he examined the contents. The necklace was beautiful, yes, but it was the pouch that fascinated him most. He had grown up in towns where survival meant being tough and self-reliant. People rarely offered help unless there was something to gain. Yet this girl, barely older than a child in his eyes, had given him a gift freely, without expecting anything in return. The leather pouch carried with it not just materials, but something far more important: trust, care, and an unspoken belief in his worth. He remembered the words she had spoken. "These are for protection, strength, and hope. Keep them with you. They will help you find your way." John had never believed in luck or magic. Life had taught him that the world was often unfair and unpredictable. Yet, as he held the pouch in his hands, he felt a quiet shift within himself. It wasn't magic in the sense of spells or charms, but the power of meaning and intention, something more human, more real. It reminded him that even the smallest gestures could carry immense weight in someone's life. John spent hours that evening sitting by the dry riverbed, watching the sun sink and the shadows stretch across the desert. He held the pouch and necklace, turning the beads over in his fingers, inhaling the scent of the herbs. Each element seemed to speak to him, reminding him of things he had forgotten: kindness, patience, and the quiet beauty of small, thoughtful acts. In a way, the girl had given him something he had never truly received before, a reason to believe that the world could be better, even in the midst of struggle. Night fell, and John built a small fire from dried twigs he found nearby. The flickering flames illuminated his face as he continued to study the pouch and its contents. He thought about the girl again, about the calmness in her eyes, the serenity in her voice, and the gentle smile that had seemed to understand him without words. She had recognized his need, not for money or food, but for hope and encouragement. It was a lesson he had not expected to learn from someone so young, yet it touched him deeply. John realized that her gift was more than just a material offering. The herbs and seeds, the careful thought she had put into them, represented a message. Even in a harsh, unforgiving world, human connection and care could survive. He thought about the long months of wandering he had endured, how he had felt invisible and unworthy. This small act of kindness seemed to counter all that pain, as if it were a thread tying him back to the possibility of goodness. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint sounds of the desert, crickets chirping, the distant howl of a coyote, and the whisper of the wind through the scrub. John placed the pouch beside him and looked up at the sky, scattered with stars. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel alone. The girl's gift had reminded him that there were people in the world who noticed, who cared, and who acted not out of obligation but out of genuine kindness. It was a thought that made his chest feel lighter, that gave him a sense of peace he had not known in months. He began to think about how he could carry this lesson forward. The pouch and necklace were physical reminders, but the true gift was the lesson itself, that generosity, patience, and care were not tied to wealth or status, but to intention and heart. Even though he had nothing, he realized he could still contribute in small ways, offer kindness where he could, and seek connection instead of isolation. The girl's gesture had shown him that human interactions, even brief ones, could shape the course of a life. Hours passed, and John finally laid down beside the small fire, the pouch tucked safely near him, the necklace around his neck. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to imagine the future, not the hardships he expected, but the possibility of small joys, acts of kindness, and moments that mattered. He thought about the girl, wondering what had inspired her to give so freely. Perhaps it was her upbringing, or perhaps it was simply who she was, a person who believed that even one small act could ripple outward and change a life. John knew that he would not forget her, nor the lessons embedded in her gift. The necklace and pouch were more than keepsakes. They were symbols of hope, reminders that even in moments of despair there could be light. He felt a new sense of determination stirring inside him, quiet but persistent. If the girl could offer such meaningful gifts without expecting anything in return, perhaps he could find ways to honor that kindness in his own life, even with nothing to give but his attention, his effort, and his care. The next morning, John woke with the sunrise painting the desert in soft pink and gold hues. The world seemed different now, quieter but fuller, as if he could see the small details he had ignored before. The way the wind moved through the scrub, the way the light fell on the rocks, and the faint footprints of animals along the sandy paths. He held the pouch and necklace close, feeling a sense of gratitude he had almost forgotten existed. He realized that life, despite its challenges, had not abandoned him. There were still moments of beauty, people with good hearts, and small gifts that could restore hope. As he prepared to leave the riverbed and continue his journey, John made a silent promise. He would carry the lesson of the girl's generosity with him wherever he went. He would remember that a single act, no matter how small, could have an impact far greater than expected. He would honor her gift by seeking ways to help others, offering kindness when he could, and recognizing the value of connection and care in a world that often seemed indifferent. John tucked the leather pouch safely into his jacket pocket and adjusted the necklace around his neck. Each step he took felt lighter, yet purposeful, as if the weight of despair that had burdened him for months had been lifted slightly by the gentle act of a stranger. The world still held challenges, he knew, but he felt better equipped to face them, not because he had money or a plan, but because he had received something far more powerful. Belief in human kindness and a reminder that hope could survive even the harshest deserts. As he walked back toward the town, John reflected on the girl's words once more. The power is not in the beads or the leather. It is in what they remind you of: courage, hope, and kindness. Those words echoed in his mind, becoming a mantra he would carry forward. They reminded him that even in the smallest moments, life could surprise you with gifts that money could not buy, with lessons that could change the direction of a life, and with people who could restore faith when it had almost vanished. John took a deep breath of the desert air, the scent of sage and earth filling his lungs. He had no certainty about what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face it. The girl's unexpected gift had transformed more than just his evening. It had begun to reshape the way he viewed the world, the way he saw others, and the way he saw himself. That small, simple act of generosity had ignited a spark, a quiet but unbreakable flame that he knew would guide him through the days to come. And as he stepped back into the town, ready to continue his journey, John realized something profound. Sometimes, the most unexpected gifts are the ones that leave the deepest marks, not in wealth or possessions, but in the heart and mind, shaping who you are and the life you are. Willing to live, John Miller walked through the quiet streets of the town, the leather pouch tucked safely in his pocket and the necklace around his neck. Each step he took seemed lighter than the day before, though he carried no more money than he had when he arrived. What he did carry, however, felt infinitely more valuable, a growing understanding that life, even in its harshest moments, could hold kindness, hope, and meaning. As he walked, he reflected on the encounter with the Apache girl. Her gentle smile, the careful way she had handed him the necklace, and the unexpected gift of the leather pouch replayed in his mind like a vivid memory. It was a simple act, yet it had shifted something inside him, something he hadn't realized was missing. For weeks, he had wandered aimlessly, burdened by loneliness and despair. But now, holding the reminders of her generosity, he felt a spark of purpose. It was small at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet fire that promised guidance and strength. He sat down on a bench outside the town's general store, watching the townspeople go about their day. Life around him moved normally, children laughing, women carrying baskets, men tending to their horses, but he saw it all differently now. Where before he might have felt invisible, he now felt connected, as if he belonged in the world, even if just for a moment. The girl's gift had taught him an invaluable lesson. It was not wealth or possessions that defined a person, but the willingness to give, to care, and to recognize the worth in others. John thought about the struggles he had endured, the long days under the scorching sun, the nights spent under the open sky, and the constant hunger that seemed to gnaw at his body and spirit. All of those hardships had left him with a sense of hopelessness, but the girl's simple act had reminded him that even small gestures could carry profound meaning. It wasn't about the dollar he had spent. It was about the connection he had made, the trust she had placed in him, and the reminder that someone believed in him. He opened the leather pouch again, carefully lifting the small bundles of herbs and seeds. Their scent was faint but grounding, earthy and familiar. He thought about how they symbolized more than just protection. They represented hope, courage, and the quiet strength that could guide him through uncertainty. As he held them, he realized that her gift was not just a physical offering, but a lesson about life itself. Sometimes, the most important gifts were invisible, existing not in the material world, but in the lessons they carried and the understanding they inspired. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. John watched the changing colors of the sky, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in months. The necklace around his neck glinted in the fading light, a small but constant reminder of the girl's generosity. He realized that her kindness had sparked something within him, a recognition that even in a world filled with hardship, one could still find moments of beauty, connection, and meaning. John thought about the people he had met in his travels. Most had been indifferent or dismissive, focused solely on their own lives. He had learned to survive by being cautious, by hiding his struggles, and by expecting little from others. But now he understood that life could be different. The girl's simple act had shown him that generosity did not require wealth or power. It only required intention, awareness, and a willingness to give. It was a lesson he had never truly learned before, and it filled him with both gratitude and determination. He spent hours reflecting on the implications of what had happened. The girl had given him more than a necklace and a pouch. She had given him a framework for living. He could carry these lessons with him wherever he went, to be attentive to the needs of others, to offer kindness when possible, and to recognize the impact of even the smallest gestures. It was a realization that reshaped his perspective, turning what he had once viewed as a lonely, meaningless journey into a path filled with potential, growth, and purpose. John also began to think about his own capacity for generosity. He had often believed that giving required money, possessions, or influence, but now he saw that even a kind word, a listening ear, or a small act of attention could have immense value. The girl had shown him that gifts could be measured not by their cost, but by the thought and care behind them. He realized that he could carry this lesson forward, offering what he could, even when he had little, and in doing so, contribute to a world that had once seemed indifferent and cold. As night fell, John found a quiet place on a small hill overlooking the town. He sat with the leather pouch resting on his lap, the necklace glinting softly in the moonlight. The desert around him was calm and silent, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts and emotions within him. He allowed himself to fully absorb the lesson he had been given, that hope, courage, and kindness could survive even the harshest circumstances, that even a single act of generosity could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were impossible to measure. John realized that the encounter with the Apache girl had transformed him. Where once he had been cautious and withdrawn, he now felt a quiet confidence, a willingness to engage with the world despite its challenges. He understood that his journey was far from over, but he also knew that he no longer had to walk it alone. He carried with him the knowledge that human connection and kindness were powerful forces, capable of changing lives in ways that nothing else could. He thought about the future and the many choices that lay ahead. There would be difficulties, no doubt, but he felt ready to face them with a renewed sense of purpose. The leather pouch and necklace were physical reminders of the lesson, but it was the understanding they carried, the knowledge that even the smallest acts of care could transform someone's life, that was truly priceless. John felt a sense of responsibility now, a desire to honor the gift he had received by living in a way that reflected the values it represented: courage, hope, and kindness. In the quiet of the night, John made a silent promise to himself. He would remember the girl's words, her actions, and the profound impact of her generosity. He would carry the lesson forward, using it to guide his own decisions and interactions. Whether he encountered strangers, friends, or even adversaries, he would strive to act with intention, to offer kindness whenever possible, and to recognize the power of small gestures in shaping the course of life. John's journey had been one of hardship and struggle, but it was also now a journey of learning and growth. The encounter with the Apache girl had reminded him that life could be beautiful, even in unexpected ways. That hope could be found in the most unlikely moments, and that acts of generosity, no matter how small, could leave lasting marks. He felt a quiet joy in this realization, a sense that his life, though still uncertain, was now moving in a meaningful direction. As he sat beneath the stars, John understood that the true gift he had received was not the necklace or the pouch, but the insight it had given him, the understanding that human kindness and compassion were among the most valuable forces in the world. They could restore hope, inspire courage, and create connections that transcended material wealth. He had learned that even in moments of despair, there was always the possibility of renewal, and that sometimes the smallest acts could leave the deepest impact. John looked up at the night sky, feeling a sense of gratitude and purpose. He had learned a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life, that generosity, patience, and understanding were treasures in themselves. And as he prepared to rest for the night, he knew that the girl's gift would continue to guide him, offering courage, hope, and the knowledge that life, no matter how difficult, could always hold moments of beauty and connection. John Miller awoke to the soft light of dawn, spilling over the desert horizon. The leather pouch rested safely on the small rock beside him, and the necklace glimmered faintly in the morning sun. The night had been quiet, and he had slept more peacefully than he had in months. As he stretched and rose, he felt something deep within him, a sense of purpose, a quiet determination, and a new understanding of life that he had never possessed before. The encounter with the Apache girl and the gifts she had given him had changed him in ways he could not fully explain, but he knew he was ready to take the first steps toward a new life. As he walked back toward the town, John thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had come with nothing, no money, no home, no family support, and yet he had received something far more valuable than any material possession: hope, trust, and a lesson in human kindness. The necklace and the leather pouch were symbols of that transformation, but the true power lay in what they represented. He had learned that life could still surprise him, that even in moments of despair, small gestures of generosity could ripple outward, changing lives in ways that were impossible to measure. John returned to the town regularly, not out of necessity, but out of choice. He wanted to be near the place where his life had begun to shift, where a single act of kindness had reminded him of the goodness that existed in the world. He began to help where he could, assisting townspeople with small tasks, repairing fences, carrying supplies, or simply offering a kind word or smile. Though he had very little, he realized that generosity was not about wealth. It was about attention, effort, and intention. Even the simplest acts could make a difference. He also made it a point to seek out the Apache girl whenever he could, to learn from her and from the traditions of her people. She welcomed him with the same calm kindness as the first day they had met. Under her guidance, John began to understand the deeper meaning behind the gifts she had given him: the leather pouch with its herbs and seeds, the carefully crafted necklace, and the lessons of patience, courage, and hope they symbolized. He learned that life was not only about surviving, but about connecting with others, offering care, and recognizing the importance of even the smallest gestures. Over time, John's life began to stabilize. He found small opportunities to work in the town, helping with chores, tending to animals, and occasionally assisting with trade. Though the work was modest, it gave him a sense of accomplishment and belonging. More importantly, he carried with him the lessons he had learned from the girl's gift. He treated others with kindness, offered help wherever he could, and took time to notice the small details of life that often went unseen. His heart felt lighter, and his spirit more resilient, as if the heavy weight of despair had finally begun to lift. John often reflected on the moment he had handed his last dollar to the girl. It had seemed like an act of desperation at the time, but now he understood that it had been a turning point. By choosing to give what little he had opened the door to a new way of seeing the world. The girl had returned more than he could have imagined, not just with a necklace and a leather pouch, but with a profound lesson about life, generosity, and human connection. Her gift had become a guiding principle, shaping the decisions he made, the way he treated others, and the life he was determined to build. As the months passed, John noticed changes not only in himself but also in those around him. The small acts of kindness he offered began to ripple outward, touching lives in subtle but meaningful ways. He helped a young boy repair his wagon, assisted an elderly woman with carrying water, and shared the lessons he had learned about hope and courage with anyone who seemed weary or discouraged. Though these gestures were small, they carried the same power that the girl's gift had carried for him, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, people could make a difference in each other's lives. The leather pouch remained with him at all times, a symbol of guidance and protection. He occasionally opened it to inhale the faint scent of the herbs, feeling a quiet reassurance each time. The necklace hung around his neck, a reminder of the encounter that had sparked his transformation. He began to understand that these items were not magical in themselves, but they represented a philosophy of life, a belief in generosity, hope, and courage that could sustain a person even when the world seemed unkind. John's transformation was not only internal but also visible to those around him. Townspeople began to notice the change in him, the calm confidence in his demeanor, and the gentle way he interacted with others. He became someone people could rely on, someone who offered help without judgment or expectation. It was a stark contrast to the weary, despondent man who had first arrived in the town with only a single dollar to his name. His life had become a testament to the power of kindness, both given and received, and to the impact that one meaningful encounter could have on a person's path. One day, as John walked through the town, he spotted a traveler who looked weary and lost, much like he had once been. He approached the man with a smile, offering assistance, food, and guidance. As he did, he realized that he was now in a position to pass on the very lessons he had learned from the Apache girl. Generosity, courage, and hope were not things that could be kept to oneself. They had to be shared. And in that sharing, the cycle of transformation continued, touching lives in ways that were both profound and subtle. John never forgot the girl who had changed his life. He often returned to her stand, not to buy anything but to learn, to offer help, and to express his gratitude. Their bond grew over time, built on mutual respect, shared understanding, and a deep appreciation for the simple truths of life. She had given him more than material gifts. She had given him the tools to rebuild his life, to see the world differently, and to live with purpose. And in turn, John sought to honor that gift in every action he took, every person he helped, and every choice he made. As the years passed, John's life became filled with connection and meaning. He had a modest home, friends in the town, and a purpose that extended beyond mere survival. He carried the lessons of the necklace and leather pouch into every interaction, recognizing that small acts of care could have lasting impact. The hardships he had endured were not forgotten, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they had become a foundation upon which he built a life grounded in kindness, courage, and hope. Looking back, John realized that spending his final dollar on the Apache girl had been the most important decision of his life. It had seemed like a simple, almost desperate act at the time, but it had opened the door to transformation. Through her generosity, he had discovered the true power of human connection, the importance of small gestures, and the value of carrying hope even in the darkest times. That one encounter had set him on a path that reshaped not only his life, but the lives of those around him, proving that even in a world full of challenges, kindness could create lasting change. In the quiet moments of reflection, John often held the necklace and pouch close, feeling the weight of their meaning. They reminded him that the world, though imperfect, was full of opportunities for connection, compassion, and transformation. The girl's gift had sparked a change that extended far beyond a single act. It had ignited a lifelong commitment to living with purpose, sharing kindness, and recognizing the profound impact of small gestures. John's story became an example for others in the town. People admired the quiet strength he carried, the generosity he offered without expectation, and the way he treated every person with dignity and respect. Though he had started with nothing, he had built a life rich in meaning, guided by the lessons of a single encounter and the gifts of an Apache girl who had believed in the power of hope, courage, and kindness. And so, John Miller's journey continued, no longer one of mere survival, but one of purpose, growth, and transformation. The necklace hung around his neck, the leather pouch stayed in his pocket, and the lessons they carried remained at the center of his life. Every day he honored the gift he had received, spreading hope, offering courage, and practicing kindness wherever he went. What had begun as a simple act of spending his final dollar had blossomed into a life filled with meaning, connection, and a deep understanding that the smallest gestures could carry the greatest power. John knew, now more than ever, that his life had been forever changed, not by wealth, luck, or chance, but by the generosity and wisdom of a young girl who had given freely and without expectation. Her gift had been unexpected, yet it had reshaped his life completely, teaching him that even in the most difficult circumstances, the human heart had the capacity for hope, transformation, and profound goodness.